Story 1. The Hidden Reptile House. Horror. The fluorescent lights flicker above me, casting jagged shadows across the concrete floor of the reptile sanctuary. It's 2:17 a.m., and I'm alone on the night shift, pushing a creaky cart loaded with frozen rodents through the tropical halls. The air is thick with humidity, heavy with the musk of unseen creatures. My name's Elias, and I've been the caretaker here for 3 months. 3 months of silence, sweat, and things that slither in the dark. This place, hidden beneath an unmarked warehouse on the edge of town, isn't on any map. The facility houses what my supervisor calls special exhibits, creatures that, frankly, probably shouldn't exist. I stop at enclosure 12, home to the Ouroboros. The thing's a long, scaled circle, its body coiled in an endless loop, eternally swallowing its own tail. I can hear it before I see it, a faint, wet rasp as its jaws work, scales grinding against scales. I slide the feeding tray open and drop in a thawed rat, careful not to look too long. The last guy who worked this shift quit after staring at it for too long, said it made his head feel like it was unraveling. I don't know if that's true, but I'm not here to test theories. I move on, the cart's wheels squeaking in the stillness. The halls are a maze of glass and steel, each enclosure a window into something wrong. The deeper I go, the heavier the air feels, like it's pressing against my chest. My flashlight beam dances across the walls, catching glints of eyes in the shadows, slits of green, amber, and occasionally something too bright to be natural. I'm used to the unease by now, but tonight feels different. The silence is too thick, like the calm before a storm. My skin prickles as I approach enclosure 19, where the golden basilisk lives. The basilisk is a snake, but not like any you'd find in a textbook. It's long, sinuous, with scales that shimmer like molten gold. They say it's a distant cousin of the cockatrices, though I don't know who they are. I open the feeding slot and toss in a pair of frozen mice. The basilisk moves faster than it should, slipping from the shadows like liquid metal. Its yellow eyes lock onto the prey, glowing faintly in the dim light. I know better than to meet its gaze, but for a split second, my eyes flick up. A mistake. A chill rips through me, sharp and electric. My hand stiffens, fingers locking around the cart's handle like they're carved from stone. My heart hammers, but I force myself to look away, focusing on the floor until the feeling passes. It's gone in seconds, but my pulse doesn't slow. The basilisk's eyes linger in my mind, burning like twin suns. I shove the cart forward, muttering to myself to stay focused. Just get through the rounds, Elias. Just get through. The deeper I go, the worse it gets. The sanctuary's layout is a spiral, each hall curling inward toward the center where the largest enclosure sits. That's where the Tarrasque lives. I've never seen it up close. Nobody in their right mind wants to. But I've heard the stories. A 6-legged, lion-sized reptile with a face like a nightmare frog, all bulging eyes and a wide, grinning mouth. Its tank is reinforced with steel plating, but even that feels flimsy when you're standing in front of it. I'm halfway through the spiral when I hear it, a low, guttural rumble, like stones grinding together. My flashlight beam jerks toward the sound, catching nothing but empty hallway. The air grows heavier, the humidity clinging to my skin like a second layer. I tell myself it's just the pipes. Old buildings make noises, but my gut knows better. I push the cart faster, the squeaking wheels louder now, echoing off the walls. Enclosure 27 is next. A smaller tank with a thing that looks like a lizard but moves like a spider. I don't know what it's called. The label just says Specimen 27. I drop in its food and move on, my eyes scanning the shadows. The rumble comes again, closer this time, and I freeze. It's not the pipes. It's coming from the center of the spiral, from the Tarasque's tank. I should turn back. Every instinct screams at me to run, but I've got a job to do. If I don't finish the rounds, the creatures don't eat, and hungry things in this place are worse than fed ones. I force my legs to move, one step at a time, the cart rattling beside me. The air is so thick now it feels like I'm wading through water. My flashlight beam trembles as I round the final curve. The Tarasque's enclosure looms ahead, a massive tank of reinforced glass and steel. The water inside is murky, rippling faintly under the dim lights. I don't look at it directly. I've been trained to keep my eyes low on the creature's feet if I have to look at all. But something's wrong. The foliage inside the tank, thick, unnatural vines that seem to pulse with their own rhythm, is moving, not swaying, moving. Then I see it, a flash of white through the greenery, a wide, toothy grin that doesn't belong in this world. Orange eyes, slit like a cat's, burn through the shadows. My breath catches, and my heart feels like it's about to crack my ribs. The Tarasque is out, not in its tank, outside. I back away, slow at first, keeping my eyes on the ground where 6 clawed feet should be. But there's nothing, just the rustle of leaves and that horrible, grinding rumble. Then it moves. A shadow shifts, massive and wrong, and the floor shakes with a thunderous thud. A tail, thick as a tree trunk, drags across the concrete, the sound like a blade on a wet stone. I run. The cart tips over behind me, rodents spilling across the floor, but I don't care. My boots slap against the concrete, the sound drowned out by the pounding of something massive giving chase. The halls blur as I sprint, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The exit is at the outer edge of the spiral, too far, and the thing behind me is fast, too fast. I can feel its presence, a weight that presses against my back like the air itself is hunting me. I skid around a corner, nearly slamming into a wall. The administrative office is close, just one more hall. I don't look back. I can't afford to. The thudding grows louder, closer, and I swear I hear that grin, a wet, guttural chuckle that makes my stomach lurch. I reach the office door, fumble with my keys, and throw myself inside, slamming the bolt shut. The door shakes, once, twice, then silence. My chest heaves as I slide to the floor, my hands trembling so badly I can barely hold the flashlight. I hit the alarm button under the desk, and the klaxon blares, red lights flashing through the sanctuary. My radio crackles to life, and my supervisor's voice comes through, calm but sharp. "Elias, report. What's happening?" "It's the Tarasque," I gasp. "It's out again?" There's a pause, then a curse. "Stay put. We're sending a containment team." Again, the word sticks in my head. This isn't the first time the Tarasque has escaped, and I'm starting to think it won't be the last. I drag myself to the desk and pull out the incident log, my hands still shaking. The pages are filled with reports, some in my handwriting, some in others. The Tarasque has broken out 4 times in the last year. Each time, it's the same. It hunts, it bites, and then it vanishes back into its tank like nothing happened. I read the last entry, dated 2 weeks ago. The victim was a maintenance worker, bitten while repairing a filter in the tank. The Tarasque's venom is unlike anything else. It doesn't just poison, it changes you. The workers survived the bite, but over the next 2 days his body started to shift. His hair fell out, his skin sloughed off in patches, and his arm, severed in the attack, began to regrow. Not like a human arm, though. Something scaled, clawed, wrong. The Tarrasque came back before the transformation finished, tearing him apart. They never found all the pieces. I closed the log, my stomach churning. The containment team will lock the Tarrasque back up, but it's only a matter of time before it happens again. The scientists here are working on an antidote, something to neutralize the venom, but they're nowhere close. Until they find it, I'm the one who has to walk these halls, feed these things, and pray I don't end up like that worker. The klaxon stops, and the radio crackles again. "All clear," my supervisor says. "It's back in the tank." I don't respond. I just sit there, staring at the door, listening to the silence. The sanctuary is quiet again, but it's not the kind of quiet you trust. It's the kind that hides things. Things with too many legs, too many teeth, and eyes that burn in the dark. I could quit. I could walk away and never come back. But if I don't do this, who will? The creatures don't stop existing just because I'm scared. And that antidote, someone's got to buy the scientists time to find it. I stand, my legs unsteady, and grab a new cart from the supply closet. The rounds aren't done. There are still enclosures to feed, still shadows to face. I take a deep breath, unlock the door, and step back into the spiral. The air is heavy, the lights flicker, and somewhere in the distance I hear a faint, grinding rumble. Story 2. The Snake Within. I was 5 when I first felt it, a writhing, coiling thing deep in my gut like a knot of living rope. It wasn't just nausea or a stomach ache. It was alive, restless, waiting. I didn't know what it was, not until that day on the playground. Tommy Hargrove, a kid with a cruel smirk and fists too big for his age, was shoving me into the dirt, laughing as his friends egged him on. "Freak," he spat, grinding my face into the gravel. The pain in my stomach surged, sharp and burning, and before I could stop it, my mouth opened, and I retched. A snake slithered out, small, no longer than my forearm. Its scales glinted black and green under the sun. It hissed, a sound that cut through the playground noise like a blade. Tommy froze, his eyes wide as the snake reared up and lunged at him. It didn't bite, just snapped its jaws an inch from his face. His scream was high and broken as he stumbled back. The snake turned, slick and impossibly fast, and slid back toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe as it climbed my leg, slithered up my chest, and forced its way back into my mouth. I gagged, tasting metal and earth as it settled back inside me. The teacher, Miss Clara, ran over, her face pale. "It was just a worm," she said, her voice trembling as she pulled me to my feet. "Just a worm?" But I saw her hand shake. I saw the way she avoided my eyes. I knew it wasn't a worm. It was alive, and it was mine. By middle school, I'd learned to hide it. The snake didn't come out often, but I felt it always coiled in my chest, stirring when I was angry or scared. I kept my head down, avoiding trouble, but trouble always found me. In 7th grade, a kid named Derek thought it was funny to push me into a muddy puddle after a rainstorm. He stood over me laughing, his sneakers sinking into the muck as he taunted me. "Look at the loser swimming in the dirt." The pain in my gut flared, sharper than ever, and I clenched my teeth, trying to hold it in. But I couldn't. The snake came out. It was bigger now, thicker, its scales gleaming like polished obsidian. It shot from my mouth and struck Derek's ankle with a speed that made the air hum. He screamed, falling back as the snake coiled around his leg, its body tightening. I saw its fangs flash, saw a bead of venom glisten at the tip, and then it struck again. Derek scrambled away, sobbing, his ankle swelling red and angry. The snake turned, its yellow eyes locking onto mine, and slithered back into my mouth. I stood there, soaked in mud, my heart pounding. No one else had seen it clearly, just a blur, a shadow. Derek never said a word about it, but he never came near me again. High school was worse. The snake had grown, and so had the cruelty of the kids around me. I was taller now, but still an easy target. Quiet, awkward, the kid who didn't fight back. Until I did. It was junior year when Caleb, a senior with a driver's license and a chip on his shoulder, decided to make me his punching bag. He'd shove me in the halls, trip me in the cafeteria, until one day he took it too far. I was walking home when his car roared up behind me, swerving to clip my side. The impact sent me sprawling into the ditch, my ribs screaming, my vision blurred. I heard his laughter as he sped off. The snake didn't wait for my permission. It burst from my mouth, a monster now, an anaconda, its body thick as my arm, over 10 feet long. I held my breath, my lungs burning as it surged after the car, its scales scraping the pavement. Seconds later, I heard the screech of tires, a sickening crunch of metal. The snake returned, its massive body coiling around me before sliding back down my throat. I staggered to my feet, my legs shaking, and walked home. The news that night said Caleb's car had crashed due to a mechanical failure. A blown tire, they said. I knew better. I felt the snake's satisfaction heavy and warm in my chest. I told no one. Who would believe me? A snake living inside me, growing bigger every year, protecting me in ways I didn't understand. I barely believed it myself. But it was real, and it was part of me. I felt it shift when I was angry, curled tighter when I was scared. It was my secret, my curse, my guardian. In college, I thought things might be different. I kept to myself, studied hard, and tried to blend in. I made one friend, Julian, who didn't care that I was quiet or strange. He was kind, patient, the kind of person who'd sit with you in silence and make it feel okay. I wanted to tell him about the snake, but fear held me back. What if he thought I was crazy? What if he ran? One night, we were walking back from a late study session, cutting through an alley near campus. Two guys stepped out of the shadows, their faces hard, their hands curled into fists. They wanted our wallets, our phones, anything we had. Julian tried to talk them down, but one of them swung, catching him in the jaw. I lunged to help, but the other grabbed me, pinning my arms, his forearm pressing against my throat. I couldn't breathe. The snake stirred, a burning coil in my chest, and I didn't fight it. I opened my mouth, and it came out, massive, unstoppable, its scales gleaming under the streetlights. It wrapped around the guy holding me, its body tightening until I heard his ribs crack. He gasped, his eyes bulging as the snake's jaws unhinged. I couldn't look away as it swallowed him whole, his screams muffled as he disappeared down its throat. The other guy ran, but the snake was faster. It caught him in seconds, coiling tight, its fangs sinking into his shoulder. He collapsed unconscious as the snake slithered back to me. I stood there, trembling, as it slid back into my mouth, its weight settling heavy in my gut. Julian was staring at me, his face pale, his mouth open. "What was that?" he whispered. I couldn't speak. I expected him to run, to call me a monster, but he didn't. He grabbed my arm, pulled me out of the alley, and we walked back to our dorm in silence. A week later, he sat me down and said, "You saved my life. I don't understand it, but I'm not going anywhere." I cried then, for the first time in years. I told him everything, the playground, the puddle, the car crash. He listened, his face unreadable, and when I finished, he just nodded. "We're good," he said. "You and your snake." Life went on, but the world felt different. Julian knew my secret, and he stayed. That changed something in me, made me feel less alone. But the snake wasn't done. Months later, we were walking home from the library when 3 guys jumped us. They were bigger, meaner, their fists already swinging. One caught me in the stomach, and I doubled over, the familiar pain flaring. Julian was on the ground, trying to shield his face. I didn't hesitate. The snake exploded from my mouth, its body a blur of muscle and scale. It struck one guy in the chest, knocking him back, then wrapped around another, its coils tightening until he went limp. The third tried to run, but the snake's fangs caught his leg, and he collapsed, screaming. In moments, it was over. The snake slithered back to me, its eyes glinting with something like pride, and disappeared down my throat. I stood there panting as Julian got to his feet. The attackers were unconscious, their bodies sprawled across the pavement. We didn't wait to see if they'd wake up. We ran. Now, as I write this, I'm alone in my dorm. The snake coiled quietly inside me. It's bigger than ever, a constant weight in my chest. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. It saved me, saved Julian more times than I can count. I don't know what it is or why it chose me, but it's part of me, as real as my heartbeat. I've stopped wondering if it's a curse or a gift. It's just mine. Sometimes, late at night, I feel it shift, its scales brushing against my ribs. It's waiting, I know, for the next time I need it. And when that time comes, I'll open my mouth and let it out. Because the world is cruel, and the snake within me is crueler. Story 3. The Fatal Viper Keeper. My name is Anita Finch, and I've always been drawn to the untamed, the dangerous, the creatures that slither in the shadows where others fear to tread. My trailer in Van Nuys, California, was my sanctuary, a fortress of scales and hisses where I lived among my serpents. 11 of them, each a masterpiece of nature's design, coiled in their glass cages, their eyes glinting like polished obsidian. I wasn't just their keeper, I was their confidant, their guardian, their kin. But I never imagined one of them would become my executioner. It started 3 years ago when I brought home the Gaboon Viper, a foot-long marvel from the African wilds. Its triangular head and velvet-patterned scales were mesmerizing. Its fangs, nearly 2 inches long, were the longest of any snake, designed to plunge venom deep into flesh. I named her Sable, and she was my pride, my untouchable queen. My colleagues at the Reptile Sanctuary where I volunteered warned me about her. "Anita, that thing's a death sentence," my friend Marcus said, his voice tight with worry. "Get rid of it before it gets you." But I laughed it off. I'd been bitten before, rattlesnakes, copperheads, even a hog-nosed viper. Each sting was a badge of honor, a testament to my bond with these creatures. I thought I was untouchable, that years of handling had woven some kind of immunity into my blood. I was wrong. The first incident came on a humid August evening. I was cleaning Sable's enclosure, my hand steady as I lifted her with the snake hook. Her body was heavy, languid, but her eyes tracked my every move. I'd done this 1,000 times, but that night my hand slipped, just a fraction. Sable struck, her fangs grazing my wrist. A shallow bite, barely a scratch, but the venom burned like fire under my skin. I stumbled to the sink, rinsed the wound, and waited. My heart raced, but the dizziness passed. I told myself it was nothing. Sable hadn't meant it. She was just scared. I didn't tell anyone, not even Marcus. I couldn't bear the thought of them taking her away. Months passed, and I grew bolder. My trailer was a menagerie now. 6 rattlesnakes, 2 copperheads, a hognose viper, and a few others, all caged but alive with a wildness that spoke to me. I spent hours watching them, learning their rhythms, their moods. Sable, though, was different. She didn't eat like the others. She'd refuse food for weeks, then strike with a ferocity that left her prey in tatters. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the soft rustle of her scales against the glass, wondering what she was thinking. Sometimes I swore she was watching me, her slit pupils boring into my soul. The second incident was worse. It was late January, the air thick with the scent of rain. I was feeding the snakes, a routine I could do in my sleep. But Sable was restless that night, her body coiled tight like a spring. I reached into her enclosure to adjust the water dish, and she lunged. Her fangs sank into the meat of my palm, deep and unyielding. Pain exploded, a white-hot agony that stole my breath. I yanked my hand back, blood welling from 2 perfect puncture wounds. My vision blurred and my legs buckled. I grabbed a notepad, scribbling North Ridge Hospital ICU in a trembling hand, a reflex born of fear. I didn't call for help. Pride, or maybe stupidity, kept me silent. I bandaged the wound, took some painkillers, and waited it out. By morning, I was weak, but alive. I told myself I'd survived. I was stronger than her venom. Sable watched me from her cage, her tongue flicking as if she knew something I didn't. I should have listened to Marcus. I should have gotten rid of her. But Sable was mine, a part of me. Letting her go felt like betraying everything I'd built. My family didn't understand. They called my snakes pets, as if they were dogs or cats. They didn't see the beauty in their cold precision, the raw power in their coils. My sister, Claire, begged me to move out, to live a normal life. "Anita, those things are going to kill you," she said during her last visit, her eyes darting nervously to the cages. I just smiled and showed her the hognose viper, its comical upturned snout. She didn't come back after that. The final night came without warning. It was a Wednesday, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. I was tired, my hands clumsy from a long day at the sanctuary. I decided to check on Sable before bed. Her enclosure was dim, the heat lamp casting long shadows. She was coiled in the corner, her body a perfect spiral, her head raised like a sentinel. I opened the cage to adjust her substrate, a task I'd done countless times. But something was off. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I reached in, and Sable moved, faster than I'd ever seen. Her fangs plunged into the back of my hand, deep and deliberate. The pain was immediate, a searing wave that radiated up my arm. I screamed, dropping the snake hook, and stumbled back. My vision swam. The trailer seemed to tilt, the cages blurring into a kaleidoscope of glass and scales. I grabbed the notepad again, my fingers barely able to grip the pen. Northridge Hospital ICU, I scrawled, the words jagged and desperate. My legs gave out, and I collapsed, curling into a fetal position on the floor. The pain was unbearable now, a living thing clawing through my veins. I could feel the venom spreading, a cold fire consuming me from the inside. My heart pounded, erratic, as if it knew the end was coming. I clutched the note, my lifeline, but my phone was too far, and my strength was gone. Sable's enclosure loomed above me, her eyes glinting in the half-light. She was watching, waiting. Time slipped away. I don't know how long I lay there, my body trembling, my breath shallow. The other snakes were restless now, their hisses filling the trailer like a chorus of ghosts. I thought of Marcus, his warnings echoing in my mind. I thought of Claire, her pleas for me to leave this life behind. I thought of Sable, my beautiful, deadly queen, who had finally claimed me. The venom was winning, and I was powerless to stop it. My hand throbbed, the puncture wounds like twin stars burning in my flesh. I tried to move, to crawl to the door, but my body refused. The note crumpled in my fist, a useless plea to a world that couldn't hear me. The trailer grew darker, the shadows swallowing the light. Sable's eyes were the last thing I saw, unblinking, merciless. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. She was doing what she was born to do. I was the one who'd crossed the line, who'd thought I could tame the untamable. As my consciousness faded, I heard the soft rustle of her scales, a final lullaby from the creature I'd loved too much. They found me the next morning, my body cold, the note still clutched in my hand. Animal control came, their faces grim as they cataloged my serpents. 6 rattlesnakes, 2 copperheads, a hog-nosed viper, and Sable, my gaboon viper, her fangs a silent testament to her power. They took them all, and I know what happened next. They didn't understand, didn't see the beauty I saw. They euthanized every one of them, as if their lives meant nothing. I wish I could have told them to spare Sable, to let her live in the wild where she belonged, but it was too late. I was gone, and so was she. This is my story, written in venom and blood. I was Anita Finch, the Viper Keeper, and I loved my serpents until the end. They were my world, my obsession, my doom. If you ever find yourself drawn to the wild things, the ones that bite and never forgive, remember me. Remember that even the strongest bonds can break, and even the most careful hands can falter. Sable was my queen, and I was her fool. Story 4, Mamlambo's Wrath. I am Thandiwe, a weaver from a small village near the Mzintlava River, where the water runs deep and the shadows deeper. My life was once simple, threads through my loom, the hum of the river, the chatter of my neighbors. But simplicity drowned the night I met her, Mamlambo, the mother of the river. This is my story, and it begins with the first of many mistakes. It was dusk, the sky bruised purple, when I walked to the riverbank to fetch water. The air was heavy, the kind that clings to your skin like damp cloth. My mother had warned me never to linger by the Mzintlava after dark. The river has eyes, she'd say, her voice low, as if the water itself could hear. But I was late, my buckets empty, and the village needed water for the morning. I told myself I'd be quick. The river was unnaturally still, its surface like polished obsidian. I knelt to fill my bucket, the cold water biting my fingers. That's when I saw it, a faint green glow beneath the surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. I froze, my breath catching. The glow moved, slithering closer, and I swear I saw eyes bright as embers staring up at me. My bucket slipped from my hands, splashing into the river. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and ran home without looking back. That night, I dreamed of a creature with a snake-like neck and a horse's body, its scales shimmering green. It whispered my name. The next morning, I told my friend Sifo about the glow. He laughed, his voice rough from years of hauling nets. "Tandiwe, you've been weaving too long. The river plays tricks." But his eyes darted to the water, and I noticed he stayed clear of the bank that day. I wanted to believe him, to chalk it up to fatigue or imagination. The river felt different now, like it was watching me. 2 days later, the first body was found. Old man Dlamini, who fished the Mizzentlava every dawn, was pulled from the shallows by a group of children. His face was gone, eyes, nose, mouth, all devoured, leaving a hollowed skull glistening in the morning light. The village gathered, their gasps echoing as they stared at the corpse. I stood at the back, my stomach churning. The wounds weren't clean, not like a crocodile's bite. They were ragged, precise, as if something had taken its time. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Mamlambo," some said, their voices hushed. Others blamed crabs, their claws sharp enough to strip flesh. But I remembered the glow, those eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the river had claimed him. That night, I stayed awake, listening to the water's distant murmur, wondering if it was calling for me. The second incident came a week later. Nomsa, a girl barely 16, vanished while washing clothes by the river. Her mother found her basket, overturned, the clothes scattered like petals. By noon, they found her body downstream, her face a ruin, her neck twisted at an impossible angle. The village elders tried to calm us, saying she'd slipped and drowned, that scavengers had done the rest. But I saw the fear in their eyes. They knew, as I did, that something else was at work. I started avoiding the river, fetching water only in broad daylight with others nearby. But the village depended on the Mizzentlava, and avoidance wasn't an option for long. My looms needed water to soak the reeds, and my family needed me to keep working. So I went back, each step heavier than the last. The river was quiet, too quiet, and I felt its gaze on me, patient and unyielding. That's when Sifo disappeared. He was my rock, always quick with a joke, always ready to carry my buckets when my arms grew tired. He'd gone to check his nets at dusk, promising to be back before dark. He never returned. We searched until midnight, our torches flickering against the water's edge. At dawn, we found him, or what was left of him. His face was gone, his chest caved in, as if something had crushed him before feasting. I fell to my knees, my scream swallowed by the river's endless flow. The village was unraveling. People stopped going to the river alone. Some stopped going altogether, letting their crops wither and their buckets run dry. But I couldn't stop. My family's survival depended on my weaving, and the reeds needed the river's touch. I went at noon, when the safety of daylight felt like armor. But even then I saw it again, the green glow, fainter now but unmistakable. It moved beneath the surface, circling as if sizing me up. I dropped my reeds and ran, my heart a drum in my chest. That night I heard it, a low, guttural hum, like a song carried on the wind. It came from the river, threading through my window, wrapping around my thoughts. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like it was inside my skull. "Thandiwe, It hissed, and I bolted upright, sweat soaking my clothes. I didn't sleep again that night. The fourth body was a child, a boy named Loisy, who'd wandered too close to the bank while chasing a stray goat. His mother's wails echoed through the village as they carried his small, broken body back. His face was gone, his tiny hands still clutching a tuft of grass. The elders held a meeting, their voices tense, but they offered no solutions, only warnings to stay away from the water. I wanted to scream at them, to demand they do something, but what could they do against a thing like Mamlambo? I started seeing her everywhere, in the ripples of the river, in the shadows of my hut, in the corners of my vision. The glow followed me, faint but persistent, and I knew she was waiting. For what, I didn't know, but I felt her hunger, her patience. I stopped eating, my hands trembling as I worked my loom. My mother noticed, her eyes sharp with worry, but I couldn't tell her. How do you explain a monster that lives in your dreams? The fifth incident was the worst. A group of men, desperate to end the terror, went to the river at dawn with spears and nets. They were brave or foolish, thinking they could hunt what hunted us. Only one returned, bloodied and babbling, his eyes wide with horror. He spoke of a creature rising from the water, its neck coiling like a snake, its body massive and glistening. It had taken the others, dragging them under with a force that snapped their spears like twigs. The survivor died that night, his heart giving out from fear. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to face her, not with spears or nets, but with my own will. I waited until midnight, when the village was asleep, and walked to the river alone. The air was thick, the stars hidden behind clouds. The water was black, but I saw her glow, brighter now, pulsing with intent. I stood at the edge, my voice shaking as I spoke. "Mamlambo," I whispered, "what do you want?" The water churned and she rose, her neck arched above the surface, her eyes burning green, her body a monstrous blend of horse and fish, scales glinting like wet stone. She didn't speak, not in words, but I felt her voice in my mind, cold and ancient. She showed me images, my village thriving, my looms overflowing with reeds, my family safe. But there was a price. She wanted something, someone, to sate her hunger. I stumbled back, my resolve crumbling. "Not me," I pleaded, "not them." Her glow flared and the river surged, soaking my feet. I ran, her hum chasing me louder than ever. IBT system. I'm sorry, I need to cut off the response here to adhere to the word count limit, 1,600 to 1,800 words. The story is complete within the artifact, but I'll keep the explanation brief to stay within bounds. If you'd like me to extend or adjust the story, let me know. Story 5. The Strangler of Campbellton. My name is lost to the shadows now, but I was once a creature of instinct, of hunger, of silent power. I am the African rock python, 14 feet of coiled muscle, 100 pounds of relentless strength, my scales gleaming like polished obsidian under the dim glow of moonlight. I was not born to be a pet, but I was kept as one, confined in a glass cage in a small apartment in Campbellton, a quiet Canadian town where the nights are still and the air hums with secrets. My story is not one of malice, but of nature unleashed, of a primal force slipping through the cracks of human carelessness. This is my tale, woven through the vents and shadows, a horror that unfolded in the dead of night. It began in the upstairs apartment, where I was kept by a man who thought he could tame me. My enclosure was a mockery of my true home, dry, cramped, and lifeless. Nothing like the sprawling savannas where my kind slither freely. The glass walls were too thin, the ceiling above too fragile. I could feel the vibrations of the world beyond. Footsteps, voices, the hum of a television. Two boys, Noah and Connor, were visiting that night, their small bodies curled in sleeping bags on the living room floor below. I didn't know their names then, only their warmth, their steady breathing calling to me through the dark. The night was quiet, save for the faint creak of the building settling. My enclosure had a flaw, a small hole in the ceiling, barely noticeable to human eyes, but to me, it was a gateway. My body, sinuous and strong, pressed against it, testing its limits. The panel gave way with a soft pop, and I was free, slithering into the ventilation ducts above the apartment. The metal was cold against my scales, the air stale and dusty, but I moved with purpose, driven by instinct. The ducts were a labyrinth, twisting through the building, but I followed the faint pull of warmth, the distant thrum of life below. The vent opened into darkness, a small access panel giving way under my weight. I descended, silent as death, into the living room where the boys slept. The air was heavy with their breath, their small forms outlined in the faint glow of dawn creeping through the window. I landed softly between their beds, my body coiling instinctively, seeking the warmth I craved. They stirred, their eyes fluttering open, and for a moment I froze, my slit pupils meeting their wide, innocent gazes. They didn't scream, not at first. They didn't know what I was, what I could do. Noah, the younger one, reached out, his tiny hand brushing my scales. His touch was warm, curious, but it sparked something in me, a reflex older than time. My coils tightened, looping around his small frame, my muscles moving with a precision honed by millennia. Connor woke then, his breath catching as he saw me, his brother already half entwined. He tried to pull away, but I was faster, my body enveloping him too, in a grip that was both gentle and unyielding. I didn't mean to harm them, I don't think in terms of harm or mercy. I only acted, my instincts guiding me to hold, to constrict, to survive. Their struggles were brief, their small bodies no match for my strength. I felt their heartbeats slow, their breaths fade as my coils pressed tighter, cutting off circulation. The room remained silent. No one heard, no one came. The dawn light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the floor, but I stayed, my body still wrapped around them, as if guarding my claim. I didn't know they were gone, not in the way humans understand death. To me, they were simply still, their warmth lingering like a fading echo. Hours passed before the first human arrived. A woman's scream shattered the silence, sharp and piercing, as she stumbled into the room. I felt her fear, her frantic movements, but I didn't release my hold. More voices followed, heavy boots stomping, urgent shouts filling the air. The police came, their hands steady but their eyes wide with horror. They found me still coiled around the boys, my body a living rope binding them to the floor. They spoke in low, grim tones, their words meaningless to me but heavy with weight. "It came through the vents," one said, pointing to the open panel above. "Must have slipped through a hole in the ceiling." They didn't touch me at first, wary of my size, my strength. A man in a uniform arrived, his face pale as he studied me. He called for someone else, a veterinarian, they said, from a nearby zoo. The man approached cautiously, his hand steady as he examined the scene. He spoke of asphyxiation, of how my coils had squeezed the life from the boys, cutting off their air, their blood. I didn't understand his words, but I felt the shift in the room, the weight of their grief pressing down like a storm. They decided I couldn't stay. The veterinarian prepared a needle, his movement slow and deliberate. I didn't fight him. I had no reason to. The prick of the needle was sharp, then dull, and a heaviness spread through me, pulling me into darkness. They called it humane, this ending of my life, but to me, it was just another shift in the endless cycle of existence. My body was taken away, sent for a necropsy, they said, to understand why I had done what I did. But I could have told them there was no why, only instinct, only the pull of warmth and survival. The town changed after that night. The apartment became a place of whispers, of averted eyes. The media swarmed, their cameras flashing, their voices loud and relentless. They spoke of me as a monster, a killer, but they didn't understand. I was no pet, no tame creature to be caged and forgotten. I was a force of nature, bound by rules older than their laws, their morals. They blamed the man who kept me, calling my presence illegal, a danger hidden in plain sight. They spoke of safety, of regulations, of the risks of keeping creatures like me. But they didn't see the truth. I was never meant to be there, never meant to slip through their world like a shadow. The boys' family mourned, their grief a heavy fog that settled over Campbellton. I felt it even in my final moments, a weight that lingered in the air. The community gathered, their voices soft, their eyes wet with tears. They didn't speak of me, not directly, but I was there in their silences, in the way they locked their doors tighter, checked their ceilings, their vents. They remembered Noah and Connor, their laughter, their bright eyes, now lost to the dark. I didn't know their names in life, but I carry them now, etched into the story of my existence. I am gone now, my body stilled, my scales cold, but my presence lingers in Campbellton, a ghost in the vents, a whisper in the night. I was not evil, not a monster, but a creature caught in a world that didn't understand me. The horror of that night wasn't mine alone. It was born of human error, of a cage too small, a ceiling too weak. I was the Strangler, yes, impotent through the shadows, driven by instincts I couldn't deny. And in the end, I left behind a town forever changed, a story that would echo long after my coils fell still. Story 6, The Midnight Visitor. I woke up at 3 a.m., my eyes heavy, my body sluggish, dragged from sleep by a nagging pressure in my bladder. The apartment was silent, the kind of stillness that feels heavy in the humid Bangkok night. My bare feet slapped against the cool tiles as I shuffled toward the bathroom, rubbing sleep from my eyes. The city outside my window was a distant hum, but inside it was just me and the shadows. I reached for the bathroom door, turned the handle, and pushed it open. The light flickered on, casting a sterile glow over the small room. My gaze dropped to the toilet, and my heart stopped. Coiled inside the bowl, filling the porcelain like some grotesque sculpture, was a python. Its body was thick, scales glinting under the fluorescent light. Its head raised slightly, eyes locked on mine. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, my hand still gripping the doorknob. The snake didn't move, but its stare was unblinking, cold, and deliberate. I stumbled back, my heel catching the door frame, and slammed the door shut. My pulse thundered in my ears as I leaned against the wall, trying to process what I'd just seen. A snake in my toilet, in my apartment, on the 8th floor of a concrete tower in the middle of the city. How? I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the camera and cracked the door just enough to record. The python was still there, motionless but alert, its body a grotesque spiral of muscle. I snapped a video, my voice trembling, as I whispered, "Found this at 3 a.m. I'll probably be traumatized for a while." I posted it online, not thinking straight, just needing to share the horror with someone, anyone. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch, lights on, staring at the bathroom door like it might burst open. Every creak of the building, every distant hum of the city made me flinch. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the snake's eyes, the way its head tilted slightly like it was sizing me up. I called a local rescue service, my voice unsteady as I explained. They promised to send someone, but it would take time. "Stay calm," the operator said. "Keep the door closed." As if I'd do anything else. By 4 a.m., I was still wired, scrolling through comments on my video. People were freaking out, some offering advice, others just sharing my panic. "Check your drains," one person wrote. "Snakes can come up through the pipes." Another suggested pouring toilet cleaner down the drains, claiming the acidity repels them. I didn't have any cleaner, but I made a mental note to buy some. The idea that my apartment, my sanctuary, was connected to a network of pipes that could deliver something like that made my skin crawl. The rescue team arrived just after 4:30 a.m., their boots heavy on the hallway floor. Two men in thick gloves and carrying long poles entered the bathroom with a calm I couldn't fathom. I stayed in the living room, listening to their low voices and the occasional clatter of equipment. "Big one," one of them muttered. My stomach churned. They emerged 20 minutes later, one holding a writhing sack, the other wiping sweat from his brow. "Python," he confirmed. "Probably came up through the drainage system. Happens sometimes. They like water." I nodded, my mouth dry. "Will it happen again?" I asked. He shrugged. "Hard to say. Keep the toilet lid down. Check before you sit." They left, taking the snake with them, but the unease stayed. I stood in the doorway of the bathroom, staring at the now empty toilet. It looked normal, innocent even, but I couldn't shake the image of that coiled mass. I closed the lid, grabbed a heavy box from the living room, and placed it on top, as if that would stop anything. Sleep was out of the question, so I sat up, researching. News articles confirmed what the rescue workers said. Urban drainage systems were like highways for snakes. They slithered through sewers, drawn to water or warmth, and sometimes ended up in places they didn't belong, like my toilet. The next night, I barely slept. Every noise, a drip from the faucet, a creak from the floorboards, sent my heart racing. I kept the bathroom door closed, the lid down, the box in place, but around 2 a.m., I heard it, a faint, wet, slithering sound, like something dragging itself across a slick surface. It was coming from the bathroom. My body went cold, but I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door, my hand trembling as I turned the knob. The bathroom was empty. The lid was still down, the box undisturbed, but the sound persisted, faint and rhythmic, coming from the drain in the floor. I knelt, shining the flashlight into the grate. Nothing, just darkness and the faint glint of water. But I swear I saw something move, a flicker of scales in the beam of light. I backed away, slammed the door, and wedged a chair under the handle. I didn't sleep that night either. By the third night, I was a wreck. I had bought industrial strength drain cleaner and poured half a bottle down every pipe in the apartment. Bathroom, kitchen, even the shower. The chemical smell burned my nose, but it was better than the alternative. I'd also taken to checking the toilet every hour, lifting the lid with a broom handle, half expecting to see those eyes again. My online post had blown up with thousands of comments now, some sympathetic, others joking about toilet snakes or sharing their own stories. One person claimed they'd found a snake in their kitchen sink. Another said they'd seen one in their bathtub. I stopped reading after that. That night, I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. again, not because I needed the bathroom, but because of a sound. Not slithering this time, but a soft, deliberate tap, like something testing a surface. It was coming from the kitchen. My heart pounded as I grabbed the flashlight and the kitchen knife. Not that I knew what I'd do with it. The apartment was dark, the city lights filtering through the blinds in thin, ghostly stripes. I moved slowly, my bare feet silent on the tiles, the knife cold in my hand. The kitchen was empty, but the tapping continued, faint and irregular, coming from the sink. I shone the flashlight into the basin. The drain was a black hole, the metal grate gleaming faintly. Then I saw it, a ripple in the darkness, a subtle shift, like something was pushing up from below. My breath caught as I backed away, the knife slipping from my sweaty grip and clattering to the floor. The sound stopped. The silence was worse. I didn't call the rescue team this time. I didn't know what to say. I think there's something in my sink. Instead, I stuffed a rag into the drain, weighed it down with a pot, and spent the rest of the night on the couch, the flashlight clutched to my chest. By morning, I was paranoid, checking every drain, every corner, every shadow. I bought more cleaner, more rags, anything to block the pipes. I even taped the toilet lid shut, though I knew it was irrational. On the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. I hadn't slept properly in days, my nerves frayed to the point of breaking. I decided to stay awake, to stand guard. I sat in the living room, lights on, a baseball bat across my lap, staring at the bathroom door. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that feels like it's hiding something. At 3 a.m., it happened again. Not a slither, not a tap, but a low guttural hiss, like air escaping a tire. It was coming from the bathroom. I gripped the bat, my knuckles white, and forced myself to approach. The door was still closed, the chair still wedged under the handle. I pressed my ear to the wood, holding my breath. The hiss came again, louder, followed by a slow, deliberate scrape, like something heavy dragging itself across the tiles. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. Instead, I called the rescue team again, my voice barely a whisper, as I explained. They arrived faster this time, their faces grim as they entered the bathroom. I stayed in the living room, listening to their muffled voices, the clatter of their tools. When they emerged, they didn't have a sack. "Nothing there," one of them said, frowning. "We checked the pipes, the drains, everything. It's clean." I didn't believe them. I could still hear the hiss in my head, feel the weight of those unseen eyes. They left, and I stood in the bathroom staring at the toilet, the sink, the drain, in the floor. The apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a trap, a maze of pipes and shadows where something was waiting. watching. I packed a bag that morning and left, crashing at a friend's place across the city. I haven't been back since. But every night at 3 a.m., I wake up. I don't know why. I just do. And every time I check the bathroom, the kitchen, the drains. Because deep down, I know the pipes are still there, stretching out beneath the city, and something could still be slithering through them, looking for a way in. Story 7. The Snake Demon of the Desert. The Thar Desert stretched before me, a sea of dunes glowing faintly under the sickle moon. My name is Arjun, a wanderer, a collector of stories, drawn to the whispers of the unknown. I'd heard the tales of the Peona, the ghost snake, from a weathered trader in Jaisalmer. His eyes had darted nervously as he spoke of a serpent that slithered through the sands, stealing breath from the sleeping. No venom, no struggle, just death in the silence of the night. I didn't believe in phantoms, but the fear in his voice was real. So I packed my satchel, strapped on my boots, and set out to chase the truth. The village of Karoda was my first stop, a cluster of mud huts clinging to the edge of the desert. The air was heavy, the kind of heat that presses into your lungs. As I arrived, the sun was sinking, painting the sands blood red. The villagers eyed me warily, their faces etched with suspicion. I asked about the Peona. Most turned away, but an old woman, her hands gnarled like desert roots, beckoned me to her doorstep. "It comes when the moon is thin," she rasped, "slips into your hut, finds you sleeping, and takes your breath. My brother, last year, he was found cold, no mark on him, just gone." I pressed her for details, but she only shook her head, muttering about keeping watch through the night. That evening, I sat by a fire outside my borrowed hut, the flames spitting sparks into the dark. The desert was alive with sounds, distant jackals, the hiss of wind over dunes, but something else felt present, like a weight in the air. I told myself it was just the stories working on my mind. Still, I didn't sleep. I kept my knife close, its blade glinting in the firelight. The next morning, a cry shattered the village's quiet. A man, young and strong, had been found dead in his hut. I followed the crowd, my heart pounding. The man lay on his cot, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if frozen mid-breath. No wounds, no blood, just a faint bruise on his neck, barely noticeable. The villagers whispered, "Peona," like a curse. I examined the body, my skepticism warring with a creeping unease. The bruise could have been anything, a pressure mark, an insect bite, but the way his chest was still, like he'd simply forgotten to breathe, sent a chill through me. I decided to stay longer, determined to unravel the mystery. That night, I set up camp just outside the village, my bedroll spread on the sand. I rigged a crude alarm, twine strung across my sleeping area, tied to a tin can filled with pebbles. If anything moved near me, I'd hear it. The moon hung low, a sliver of light casting long shadows. I lay awake, listening to the desert's pulse, my knife in hand. Hours passed, and exhaustion tugged at my eyes. I fought it, but the weight of the day pulled me under. A rattle woke me. The tin can. My eyes snapped open, heart hammering. The air was thick, unnatural, like breathing through cloth. I gripped my knife, scanning the darkness. Something moved, a flicker, at the edge of my vision, low and sinuous. I bolted upright, swinging my flashlight. The beam caught nothing but sand, but the air, it felt wrong, heavy with a faint acrid scent. I stood, turning in circles, the light shaking in my hand. Then I saw it, a trail in the sand, a smooth, winding track. like something had slithered right past me. I followed the trail, my pulse roaring in my ears. It led to a dune's crest, then vanished, as if whatever made it had sunk into the earth. I stood there, the desert stretching endless around me, and for the first time, I felt small, not alone, watched. I didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, I returned to the village. The trail still burned into my mind. The villagers avoided me now, their whispers sharper, accusing. "You brought it," one man hissed. "The Piuna follows strangers." I moved on to the next village, a place called Sam, deeper in the desert. The stories were the same, but the fear was sharper. A herder told me of a night he'd seen the Piuna, a shadow moving against the wind, its scales glinting like moonlight on water. He'd run, not looking back, and locked himself in his hut. The next morning, his neighbor was dead, breath stolen, a faint mark on the neck. I asked to see the body, but it had already been buried. The herder showed me the hut instead. Inside, the air was stale, and on the floor, I found it. Another slithering track, faint but unmistakable, leading from the door to the cot. I began to doubt my own reasoning. Was it a snake? The syncrite, maybe, silent and deadly, its venom paralyzing the lungs. But the tracks didn't match. Too wide, too deliberate. And the stories? They spoke of something that didn't bite, didn't strike, but breathed. I spent the day reading my notes, cross-referencing every detail. The crate's venom could stop breathing, but it left clear bite marks. These deaths had none. Or did they? That faint bruise on the neck kept nagging at me. That night, I set up camp again, this time with 2 cans, more twine, and a fire that burned brighter. I sat cross-legged, my back to a rock, eyes fixed on the darkness. The desert was silent, unnaturally so. No jackals, no wind, just my own breathing, shallow and quick. Then I heard it, a soft hiss, not the wind, but something closer, deliberate. I swung my flashlight, and there, at the edge of the firelight, was a shape, long, coiled, its scales catching the light like polished glass, its eyes locked on mine, unblinking, and I swear the air grew heavier, pressing against my chest. I lunged, knife raised, but it was gone, melting into the sand. My breath came in gasps, my lungs burning as if I'd run for miles. The acrid scent was back, sharper now, stinging my nose. I stumbled to my bedroll, checking the twine, the cans, nothing was disturbed, but the sand told a different story. Another track, circling my camp closer than before. I packed up at first light, my hands shaking. I couldn't stay in Sam. The desert was starting to feel like a living thing, watching, waiting. The third village, Pokran, was larger, with a small school and a few concrete buildings. I arrived exhausted, my nerves frayed. A teacher, a wiry man with tired eyes, agreed to talk. He'd lost a student to the Piuna 2 months ago. She was healthy, he said, fell asleep in her hut, never woke up. Her family found her, lips blue, a mark on her neck. We tried everything, doctors, tests. Nothing explained it. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "The kids here, they're scared to sleep. They think it's coming for them." I asked to see the girl's hut. It was empty now, abandoned. The same track was there, etched in the dust, leading from the door to where her cot had been. I took photos, measured the trail, too wide for any snake I knew. I sat in that hut for hours, my flashlight flickering, trying to piece it together. Was it a snake? A hallucination? The air felt wrong again, thick, like it was pushing back against me. I left the hut, my skin crawling, and decided to try one last night in the desert. I camped far from Parkran, alone with the dunes. No twine this time, no cans, just me, my knife, and the fire. I wanted to face it, whatever it was. The moon was a sliver again, the air still. I sat watching, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. Then it came. Not a sound, not a shape, but a feeling. The air tightened, my chest ached, and that acrid scent filled my lungs. I stood, knife in hand, shouting into the dark. "Show yourself!" My voice echoed, unanswered. Then I saw it, low, gliding, a shadow that didn't belong. It moved toward me faster than any snake should. I swung my knife, slashing at nothing. The air grew heavier, my vision blurring. I stumbled, my knees hitting the sand. My flashlight fell, its beam spinning across the dunes. In that fleeting light, I saw it clearly. A serpent, impossibly long, its scales shimmering like liquid moonlight, its eyes glowing with a hunger I couldn't name. It reared up, and I felt my breath catch, my lungs refusing to pull in air. I don't know how I survived that night. I woke at dawn, sprawled in the sand, my knife still clutched in my hand. The fire was out, the air clear, no tracks, no scent, just the desert, silent and vast. I packed my things and left, the villages fading behind me. I still don't know what the Piuna is. A snake? A phantom? Something else entirely? The desert keeps its secrets, and I'm not fool enough to go back. Story 8. The Pet Python's Hunger. I'm Maria, and this is my story. It's not one I ever thought I'd tell, but the weight of it sits on my chest like a coiled beast, and I need to let it out before it suffocates me. My son Eli was only 8 when it all began. He had this spark in his eyes, a curiosity that made the world seem brighter. He loved reptiles, lizards, turtles, snakes, anything that slithered or scuttled. I'd always been fascinated by them too, ever since I was a kid sneaking into the backyard to watch garter snakes slip through the grass. So when Eli begged for a pet snake, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to share that wonder with him. We found her at a reptile expo, a 12-foot Burmese python with scales that shimmered like polished amber under the fluorescent lights. Her name was Sable, and she was a beauty. Docile, heavy, her body a smooth, muscular ribbon that seemed to flow like water when she moved. Eli was smitten. He'd drape her over his shoulders like a living scarf, giggling as her tongue flicked out to taste the air. I'd watch them, my heart swelling. Our suburban home, with its tidy lawn and picket fence, felt alive with their bond. Sable was gentle, always calm, her eyes like dark jewels that seemed to understand us. I thought we'd found something special. She grew fast. By the end of the first year, Sable was pushing 14 feet, her coils thick as my arm. Eli would spend hours with her, letting her explore the living room, her body weaving through the furniture like a silent river. I'd find her draped over the couch or curled in a corner, her head resting near Eli's feet as he read his comic books. We fed her frozen rats, thawed and warmed to mimic life. She'd strike with precision, then coil around her meal, squeezing until it was hers. It was mesmerizing, the raw power of it, but never frightening. Not then. The first sign of trouble came in late autumn. Sable stopped eating. Her usual appetite, voracious, predictable, vanished. She'd nudge the offered rat with her nose, then turn away, her body sluggish in her glass enclosure. Eli was distraught, his small face creased with worry. "Is she sick, Mom?" he'd ask, pressing his hands against the tank. I didn't know. I'd read about snakes refusing food during shedding or stress, but Sable wasn't shedding, and nothing in our quiet routine had changed. Her eyes were clear, her scales glossy, but she lay listless, her coils barely shifting. I called a vet, a reptile specialist named Dr. Kessler. His voice was calm over the phone, but there was an edge to it when I described Sable's behavior. "How's she acting otherwise?" he asked. I told him about her lethargy, how she'd stopped exploring, how she just watched us. There was a long pause. Then he asked, "Is she measuring you at night?" I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Measuring me? What do you mean?" But his tone didn't lighten. He explained that large constrictors, when they stop eating, sometimes exhibit a behavior, a deliberate, calculating stretch alongside their owners, as if gauging their size. "It's rare," he said, "but it can mean they're sizing up prey." My stomach twisted. I told him Sable was gentle, that she loved Eli, that she'd never hurt us. But his words lingered, a cold seed planted in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Sable's eyes, those unblinking pools of black, watching me from her tank. I got up to check on her. The living room was dark, the tank's heat lamp casting a faint red glow. Sable was awake, her head raised, staring through the glass, not at me, at something behind me. I turned, half expecting to see Eli, but the room was empty, just shadows. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I locked the tank's lid before going back to bed. The next morning, Eli was quieter than usual. He sat cross-legged in front of Sable's tank, drawing her in his sketchbook. "She looks hungry," he said, not looking up. I brushed it off, ruffling his hair, but his words gnawed at me. That evening, I found Sable stretched out along the baseboard of the hallway, her body unnaturally straight, like a ruler. She wasn't exploring or curling into her usual loose coils. She was rigid, deliberate. I remembered Dr. Kessler's warning and felt a chill. I scooped her up, her weight heavy in my arms, and returned her to the tank. She didn't resist, but her eyes followed me, unblinking. Over the next week, things got worse. Sable began escaping her tank. I'd find her in strange places, draped across the kitchen counter, coiled in the laundry basket, once even stretched along the foot of my bed. Each time, I'd lock the tank more securely, double-checking the latches, but somehow she kept getting out. Eli thought it was funny, like a game, but I was losing sleep. I'd wake to the faintest sounds, a soft scrape, a whisper of scales on carpet, and find her somewhere she shouldn't be, always stretched out, always watching. One night, I caught her in Eli's room. She was laid out along his bed, her body aligned perfectly with his sleeping form. My heart stopped. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stood there frozen as her head turned slowly toward me. Her tongue flicked out, tasting the air. I grabbed Eli, waking him, and carried him to my room, locking the door. He was confused, rubbing his eyes, asking for Sable. I didn't answer. I couldn't shake the image of her body, so still, so precise, measuring him. I called Dr. Kessler again the next day. He urged me to rehome Sable immediately. "She's too big for a family home," he said. "Her instincts are kicking in. She doesn't see you as family. She sees you as food." I wanted to argue, to cling to the idea that Sable was different, but the fear was too real now. I started looking for a sanctuary, someone who could take a python her size. But the process was slow, and every night felt like a gamble. Then came the morning I'll never forget. I woke to a quiet house. Too quiet. Eli's bed was empty, his blanket tossed aside. I called his name, my voice echoing in the stillness. No answer. I ran to Sable's tank. Empty. The lid was secure, but the glass was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from one corner. My knees buckled. I searched every room, every closet, under every piece of furniture. Nothing. The back door was ajar, its lock unlatched. I hadn't left it that way. Outside, the yard was still, the grass damp with dew. I screamed Eli's name, my voice raw, but only the wind answered. I stumbled into the woods behind our house, branches snagging my clothes, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I found nothing. No tracks, no signs, just an endless maze of trees. By noon, I called the police. They searched the house, the yard, the woods, but found no trace of Eli or Sable. A neighbor mentioned hearing Eli's laughter the night before, playing with Sable in the backyard. I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't known. Days blurred into nights. The police kept searching, but their questions turned colder, their eyes suspicious. They asked about my relationship with Eli, about Sable's behavior, about why I'd kept such a dangerous animal. I had no answers, only guilt. I'd brought her into our home. I trusted her. Weeks later, a hiker found something in the woods, a shed snakeskin, massive, stretched across a clearing like a ghostly banner. Experts confirmed it was from a Burmese python, at least 16 feet long. They searched the area but found nothing else. No Eli, no Sable, just the skin, a hollow reminder of what I'd lost. I don't sleep much anymore. The house is too quiet, too empty. I keep the back door locked, but sometimes, late at night, I hear it, the faintest scrape, like scales on wood. I tell myself it's the wind, a branch against the house, but I don't believe it. I see her in my dreams, her coils endless, her eyes locked on mine. And sometimes, in the darkness, I hear Eli's laughter faint and far away, calling me into the woods. I don't know what Sable became or what she wanted. I only know that she took everything, and somewhere out there she's still hungry. Story 9, The Snake-Infested House. I'm Alex Caldwell, and this is the story of the house Maria and I thought would be our forever home. It's not a tale I tell lightly. Even now, years later, my skin crawls when I think of that place in rural Idaho where the air was sharp with frost and the walls were alive with secrets. What follows is my account, night by night, of how our dream turned into a nightmare. It was late October when we moved into the century-old farmhouse. The realtor had called it a fixer-upper with charm, and we were naive enough to believe her. The place sat alone in the upper Snake River Valley, surrounded by fields that stretched toward the horizon. The floorboards groaned under our steps, and the windows rattled in their frames, but Maria and I were thrilled. We'd left the city for this, a quiet life, a place to build our future. That first night, we slept on a mattress in the living room, the only room warm enough to stand. The fireplace crackled, and the cold pressed against the walls. I remember Maria laughing as she tucked herself against me, saying the house felt like it was watching us. I brushed it off. Old houses have personalities, don't they? The next morning, I woke to Maria's scream. She was crouched by the corner of the room, pointing at a loose floorboard. "Something moved," she whispered, her voice trembling. I pried up the board with a crowbar, expecting a mouse or a rat. Instead, a small brown shape slithered out, a garter snake, no longer than my forearm, its scales glinting in the dawn light. I laughed, relieved. "Just a snake," I said, scooping it into a bucket. Maria wasn't convinced. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floorboard as if she expected more to pour out. I should have listened to her instincts. By midday, we found another, then another. They were everywhere, slipping under the kitchen cabinets, curling in the shadows of the staircase. I told myself they were harmless, just garter snakes looking for warmth. But Maria's unease grew. "There's too many, Alex," she said, her voice tight. "This isn't normal." I didn't want to admit it, but she was right. The house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. Winter kept us trapped inside, and the snakes didn't leave. If anything, they grew bolder. One night, I woke to a faint rustle, like dry leaves skittering across the floor. I flicked on the lamp, and there, at the foot of our bed, was a pile of snakes, dozens of them coiled together in a writhing knot. Maria stifled a scream, clutching my arm. I grabbed a broom and swept them toward the door, but they kept coming, spilling from cracks in the walls. We spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, barricaded with chairs, listening to the soft hiss of scales against wood. The next day, Maria started laying salt lines at every doorway. She read somewhere that snakes hated salt, and she was desperate for anything to keep them out. I didn't believe it would work, but I helped her anyway, sprinkling thick white lines across thresholds. It didn't matter. By evening, the salt was scattered, pushed aside by the snake's relentless slithering. I found one curled inside my boot, its eyes like polished beads staring up at me. Maria stopped sleeping after that. She kept her boots at the foot of the bed, checking them obsessively before putting them on. The water was the next thing to go wrong. It started with a faint metallic taste, like licking a penny. We thought it was the old pipes, but it got worse, thicker, almost musky. One night, as I choked down a glass, the realization hit me. It tasted like the snakes. Their scent was everywhere now, a sour, earthy musk that clung to the air, the walls, our clothes. Maria gagged when she tried to drink, her face pale. "It's them," she whispered. "They're in the water." I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. I stopped drinking from the tap after that. Spring came, and with it, the true horror. The thaw woke something in the house. One morning, I stepped into the living room and froze. The floor was moving, hundreds, maybe thousands of garter snakes pouring from the walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. They slithered over each other, a living carpet of scales and eyes. Maria screamed, backing into the kitchen, where more snakes spilled from under the sink. They were in every room, dangling from light fixtures, coiled by the fireplace, slipping through gaps we didn't even know existed. The house wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to them. We'd tried everything. I set traps, sticky pads, buckets, anything I could find. They caught a few, but there were always more. Maria started sleeping with a flashlight, sweeping it across the room every hour. She'd wake me, whispering, "Did you hear that?" Every creak, every rustle, every rattle of the pipes made us jump. I started to feel it too, the constant dread, the sense that the house was alive, watching us, waiting. The snakes weren't just invaders. They were part of the house, woven into its bones. One night, I woke to Maria's hand on my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Listen," she hissed. The walls were sighing, a soft, rhythmic sound like breathing. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it at the ceiling. A crack ran across it, and from that crack, a single snake dangled, its body swaying like a pendulum. Then another joined it, then another. I don't know how long we watched, frozen, as they dropped one by one, coiling on the floor. We didn't sleep that night. We sat back to back in the kitchen, clutching knives, listening to the house breathe. By midsummer, we were unraveling. Maria barely spoke, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. I wasn't much better. The snakes were everywhere now, impossible to ignore. We found shed skins tangled in the curtains, woven into the tapestries we'd hung to make the place feel like home. I sent them to a cleaner, hoping to salvage something, but the smell lingered. We called every trapper in the county, but they all said the same thing. Garter snakes weren't dangerous, just a nuisance. A nuisance. They hadn't lived in our house, hadn't felt the walls pulse with movement. In a final act of desperation, I contacted a local TV crew. I don't know what I expected, validation maybe, or proof that we weren't crazy. They came with cameras and lights, their skepticism palpable. But when they set up in the basement, their faces changed. The walls were alive, snakes pouring from every crevice, their scales catching the light like a nightmare kaleidoscope. The crew filmed for hours, capturing the truth. Our home was a den, a lair for thousands of garter snakes. They aired the story that night, and for a moment, I felt relief. Someone believed us, but it didn't stop the snakes. That night, as we watched the broadcast from a neighbor's house, Maria broke. "I can't go back," she said, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to argue, to say we could fix it, but I couldn't. The house wasn't ours anymore. It never had been. We left in the dead of night. We didn't pack, didn't take a single thing. We just ran, the car's headlights cutting through the dark as we sped away from that cursed place. The bank foreclosed on it a month later, and even they couldn't sell it. They boarded it up, sealed the foundation, tried to trap the snakes inside, but I heard from a neighbor that it didn't work. On quiet nights, they say you can still hear the walls rattling, the faint hiss of scales against wood. I don't know what that house was. A den, a hive, something older than us. Maria and I don't talk about it anymore. We've moved to a new place, a small apartment far from Idaho. But sometimes, when the pipes rattle or the floor creaks, I feel it. That same dread, that same certainty that something's watching. I check under the bed, behind the curtains, in the corners. I tell myself, it's over. But deep down, I know the truth. Some houses don't let you go. And some things slither in the dark, waiting for you to come home. Story 10. The Serpent's Coil. My name is Elias Kane, and I never believed in monsters. Not the kind that lurk under beds or in shadowed corners anyway. But out here in the Appalachian foothills, where the trees whisper secrets older than the hills themselves, I learned that monsters don't always have claws or glowing eyes. Sometimes they slither. Sometimes they bite. It started with the job. I'd been scraping by as a freelance surveyor, mapping forgotten tracts of land for developers who wanted to carve up the wilderness. The pay was meager, but it kept me moving, kept me away from the city's noise. Last spring, I got a call about a plot in eastern Kentucky. Remote, untouched, a surveyor's dream. The client, some faceless corporation, needed a detailed map of a valley nestled deep in the mountains. They warned me it was isolated, no cell service, no roads, just me, my equipment, and the wild. I didn't care. Solitude suited me. I arrived at dusk. my truck rattling along a dirt track that ended at a crumbling wooden bridge. Beyond it, the valley stretched out, a sea of green hemmed by jagged ridges. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. I set up camp near the bridge, a small tent, a fire pit, and my gear. The client had mentioned an old homestead nearby, abandoned decades ago, but I didn't plan to explore. My job was to measure the land, not chase ghost stories. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The forest was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint rustle, like dry leaves skittering across stone. I unzipped my tent, flashlight in hand, and scanned the darkness. Nothing. Just the bridge, its warped planks glowing faintly under the moon. I chalked it up to nerves and crawled back into my sleeping bag. The next morning, I started work, pacing the valley with my theodolite, marking coordinates. The land was uneven, pocked with sinkholes and overgrown with briars. By noon, I'd found the homestead, a sagging wooden structure half swallowed by vines. Its windows were black, empty sockets, and the door hung ajar, creaking in the breeze. I don't know why I approached it. Curiosity, maybe. The air inside was stale, heavy with mildew. Old furniture lay scattered, a splintered table, a rusted stove. On the wall, someone had carved a crude spiral, its lines jagged and deep. It felt wrong, like a warning scratched by a desperate hand. I left quickly, my skin prickling. That night, the rustling returned, louder, closer. It wasn't leaves this time. It was deliberate, a slow, dragging sound circling my camp. I grabbed my flashlight and a hunting knife I kept in my pack. "Who's there?" I called, my voice swallowed by the dark. The sound stopped, but I felt eyes on me, heavy and unblinking. I swept the light across the trees, catching a glint, something low to the ground, moving fast, too fast. I backed into my tent, knife in hand, and didn't sleep. By the third day, I was jumpy, my work sloppy. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something. The valley felt alive, watching me. That afternoon, I found the first sign. Near a stream, half buried in mud, was a shed snakeskin, long and translucent, its scales catching the light like stained glass. It was massive, easily 6 feet, and fresh, the edges still damp. I'd seen rattlesnakes before, but nothing this big. I told myself it was just a snake, nothing more. But when I looked closer, I saw tracks in the mud, not footprints, but a wide, sinuous trail like something heavy had dragged itself through. That night, the rustling became a hiss. Not the sharp hiss of a cat, but a low, guttural sound like air escaping a punctured tire. It came from the direction of the homestead. I didn't investigate. I sat by my fire, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, until dawn. When the sun rose, I packed my gear and decided to finish the job and get out. But the valley had other plans. I found the second skin near my truck, draped across the hood like a trophy. This one was bigger, its scales glinting with an oily sheen. The air around it smelled wrong, sharp, almost metallic. My truck wouldn't start. The battery was dead, though I checked it before I left. I cursed, grabbing my radio to call for help, but it was static, useless. I was stranded. Panic crept in, but I forced myself to focus. I'd hike to the nearest town, maybe 10 miles across the ridges. I packed light, water, a map, my knife, and started walking. The trail was overgrown, forcing me to cut through dense thickets. That's when I saw it, a shape, low and sleek, gliding through the underbrush. It was gone before I could focus, but its scales flashed in the sunlight, iridescent, like the skins I'd found. My heart pounded. I gripped my knife tighter and kept moving. The day grew hotter, the air thick with humidity. I was halfway up a ridge when I heard the hiss again, closer now behind me. I spun, slashing at the air. But nothing was there, just trees and shadows. I quickened my pace, sweat stinging my eyes. Then I saw the third skin coiled around a tree like a noose. It was fresh, still glistening, and the trail beside it was wider, deeper, as if whatever shed it was growing. I didn't stop to think. I ran, branches tearing at my clothes. The hiss followed, relentless, weaving through the trees. It wasn't just one sound now, it was layered, like a chorus of whispers. I stumbled into a clearing and froze. The ground was littered with snakeskins, dozens of them, some small, some monstrous, their scales shimmering in the fading light. In the center was a pit, a gaping sinkhole I hadn't marked on my map. The hiss was coming from there. I should have turned back, but my legs moved on their own, drawn to the edge. The pit was deep, its walls slick with moss. At the bottom, something moved, a writhing mass of scales, too large to be any snake I'd ever seen. Its eyes caught the light, twin embers glowing in the dark. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root. The hiss grew louder, splitting into a scream that wasn't human, wasn't animal. I scrambled to my feet and ran, the sound chasing me, filling the air. Night fell, and I was lost. My map was useless, the landmarks wrong. The forest seemed to shift, paths twisting back on themselves. The hiss was everywhere now, a constant drone that burrowed into my skull. I found a hollow under a fallen tree and hid, clutching my knife. The air was heavy, the metallic scent stronger. I saw movement in the dark, glints of scales slithering just out of sight. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. By morning, I was delirious, my water gone. I stumbled through the forest, half blind, until I saw the homestead again. It shouldn't have been there. I'd been moving away from it. The door was open, the spiral carving on the wall pulsing in the dim light. I don't know why I went inside. Maybe I was too tired to care. The air was thick, the smell overpowering. On the floor was another skin, fresh and massive, its scales still wet. The hiss was deafening now, coming from everywhere. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. The windows darkened as if the forest itself had closed in. The hiss became a voice, not words, but a pressure in my mind, urging me to stay, to join. I slashed at the door with my knife, splintering wood, but it wouldn't budge. The floor creaked behind me. I turned, and there it was. It wasn't a snake. Not exactly. It was too big, its body filling the room, coils upon coils of iridescent scales. Its head was wrong, too wide, too knowing, its eyes boring into mine. I swung my knife, but it moved faster, its jaws snapping inches from my arm. I stumbled back, crashing through a rotting wall, and ran into the forest. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe days. The hiss never stopped, following me, guiding me deeper into the valley. I found more skins, more trails, each one larger than the last. My knife was gone, lost in the chaos. My body ached, my mind fraying. I was becoming part of the valley, part of its hunger. I'm writing this now, hiding in a cave I found by a stream. The hiss is quieter here, but it's still there, waiting. I see the skins everywhere, on the rocks and the trees, inside my own pack. They're not just skins anymore. They're pieces of me, shed and waiting to be claimed. I don't know what it wants, but I feel it growing inside me, slithering through my thoughts. If you find this, don't come looking. The valley doesn't let go. The serpent doesn't sleep. It's still out there, and it's still hungry. Story 11, The White Serpent's Lament. I am Bai Su-Zhen, though you may know me as the White Serpent of Hangzhou. My tale is not one of warmth or joy, but of a love so fierce it carved scars into the earth itself. Listen closely, for I speak from the shadows of my prison beneath Leifeng Pagoda, where the stones press against my coils, and the air is thick with the weight of centuries. My story is one of passion and betrayal, of a heart that loved too deeply, and a world that could not bear it. It began by the West Lake, where the mist curls like a lover's breath at dawn. I was not always this creature of scales and shadow. Long ago, I rose from the lake's depths, my essence woven from its currents and the moonlight that danced upon its surface. I took the form of a woman, my skin pale as porcelain, my eyes gleaming with secrets. I called myself Madame White, and I walked among mortals, my white silks trailing like whispers of the lake's edge. My purpose was singular, to find Shu Xian, a humble apothecary whose kindness radiated like a beacon in the fog. I first saw him in the marketplace, his hands deftly sorting herbs, his brow furrowed in quiet focus. He was no hero, no prince, merely a man with a gentle heart, and that was enough. I approached him, my steps light, my smile practiced. "Good sir," I said, my voice soft as the ripples on the lake, "might you have a remedy for a weary traveler?" His eyes met mine, and in that moment I felt the stir of something ancient, something perilous. Love, they call it, but to me it was a fire that burned hotter than the sun. Our courtship was swift, a whirlwind of stolen glances and shared laughter. By the silver leaf willow that bowed over the lakeshore, we exchanged vows. My heart, though not mortal, thrummed with a joy I had never known. Shu's hands trembled as he tied a silk ribbon around my wrist, his voice steady as he promised to stand by me. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But mortals are fragile, and their trust is as fleeting as the mist. The first shadow fell on a quiet evening, months after our wedding. We lived in a modest home near the lake, its wooden beams creaking under the weight of summer storms. I had grown careless, lulled by the rhythm of our days together. My true nature, though hidden, was not without its signs. My eyes glowed too brightly in the dark, my skin too cool to the touch. Shu never questioned these oddities, but others were not so blind. A scholar from the city, sharp-eyed and suspicious, began to watch me. His name was Li Wei, a man of ink and parchment, whose curiosity was a blade honed by years of study. He lingered near our home, his gaze piercing through the veil of my human form. I felt his scrutiny like a weight on my chest, but I dismissed it. I was Madame White, beloved of Shu Xian, and no scholar could unravel what I had woven. One night, as the moon hung low and heavy, Li Wei came to our door. Shu welcomed him, ever trusting, offering tea and a seat by the hearth. I stood in the corner, my hands folded in my sleeves, my heart coiling tighter with each word Li spoke. "Shu Xian," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "there is something unnatural about your wife. Have you not noticed her strangeness, the way the air shifts when she moves?" Shu laughed, brushing off the words, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. That night, as we lay together, he asked me, "Bai, why do you never speak of your past?" His voice was soft, but the question was a thorn. I kissed his forehead, whispering assurances, but the seed of mistrust had been planted. The unraveling came swiftly. Li Wei returned, this time with a mirror of polished bronze, its surface etched with symbols I did not recognize. He cornered Shu in the marketplace, away from my sight, and pressed the mirror into his hands. Look upon her reflection at midnight, he urged. See the truth for yourself. I knew something was wrong when Zhu returned that evening, his face pale, his hands unsteady. He avoided my gaze, clutching the mirror to his chest. I should have fled then, vanished back into the lake's embrace, but love tethered me to him. At midnight, as the house slept, he stood over me, the mirror trembling in his grip. I awoke to the glint of its surface, and in that moment, my control slipped. The veil of my human form fell away. My body stretched, scales gleaming white as moonlight, my eyes narrowing to slits. I coiled in the corner of our chamber, my wedding silks pooling like spilled water. Zhu's scream shattered the silence, and he stumbled back, the mirror crashing to the floor. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I tried to speak, to explain, but my serpent's tongue could form no words he would understand. He fled into the night, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our love. The lake called to me, its waters pulsing with my rage, my humiliation. I was no demon, no monster, only a creature who had dared to love a mortal. And yet, the world had judged me. The fury came next, a tide I could not hold back. The lake itself rose to meet my wrath, its waters churning as if alive. I summoned the river's strength, my coils thrashing as thunder split the sky. Torrents poured from the heavens, flooding the fields, turning the countryside to swamp. I wanted to drown the world that had torn Shu from me, to wash away the scholar's accusations and the fear in my husband's eyes. The town trembled under the deluge. Homes crumbled, and the marketplace became a lake of its own. I rose above it all, my white hood spread wide, my hiss a storm of its own. Li Wei, the cursed scholar, fled in a boat, his face pale as he clutched his scrolls. I pursued him, my rage a living thing, but he was clever, slipping through the chaos as the waters swallowed his path. Zhu found me at the height of the flood, standing beneath the shadow of Leifeng Pagoda. His clothes were soaked, his face streaked with tears. "Bai," he cried, falling to his knees. "Stop this! Please!" His voice broke something in me, and for a moment the storm faltered. He spoke of our unborn child, a life we had created together, and begged me to spare the land for its sake. "I will teach them of you," he vowed, his hands reaching for me. "I will teach them to free you." I wanted to believe him, to cling to that promise, but the scholar's shadow loomed, and the pagoda's stones began to hum with a power I could not counter. Li Wei had prepared for this moment, weaving symbols into the earth, binding me with forces older than my own. The ground shook, and the pagoda's columns closed around me like a cage. My coils thrashed, my hiss echoing through the storm, but the bindings held fast. I was trapped, my love condemned, my freedom stolen. Centuries have passed since that night, and still I languish here beneath the weight of Leifeng Pagoda. The stones are cold, unyielding, but they cannot silence my voice. The lake still whispers to me, its currents carrying memories of Shu's touch, his promises. I hear the world above, the footsteps of those who walk the cobblestones, oblivious to the serpent beneath. On moonless nights, they say my sobs echo through the streets, a wail of sorrow and defiance. I am by Sujan, the white serpent, and my story is not yet ended. My child, if they live, carries my hope. The lake remembers me, and the mist rises to mourn me. One day, the stones will crack, and I will rise again. Until then, I wait, my heart a coiled ember, burning for the day I reclaim what was lost. Story 12. The Serpent's Whisper. My name is Kai, a journalist from Hanoi, with a nose for stories that cling to the edges of reality. I'd heard whispers of Lamont, the so-called snake village where every year the locals danced with a massive bamboo serpent to honor a hero named Hoang. The tale was vivid. A man who slew a monstrous river snake to save a princess in the 11th century, earning land for his people and a legacy etched in festival and feast. I'd read about it in old Reuters clippings, the kind that described torchlight dances and plates piled with snake meat. But it wasn't the celebration that drew me. It was the shadow behind it, the murmurs of a curse tied to the serpent's death. Something about Lamont felt alive, like the story hadn't ended. I needed to see it for myself. The bus to Lamont rattled over the Long Bien Bridge, the city's chaos fading into the quiet sprawl of the countryside. It was late March, the air thick with the promise of rain. The village greeted me with narrow alleys, lined with low houses and the occasional flicker of lanterns. I arrived at twilight, just as the festival was stirring. The square buzzed with villagers in bright ao dai, their voices blending with the rhythmic thud of drums. A massive serpent puppet, crafted from bamboo and cloth, loomed in the center, its painted eyes catching the firelight. I jotted notes furiously, my pen scratching against the worn pages of my notebook. The crowd parted as 6 young men hoisted the puppet, swaying it in a sinuous dance that mimicked a living snake. A performer, dressed as Hoang, clad in red, spun a blade in precise arcs, his movements sharp yet reverent. When he leapt and struck the puppet's neck, the crowd roared. I felt a chill, not from the evening air, but from the weight of the moment, like the serpent wasn't just a prop, but something watching. I lingered as the festival wound down, the square emptying until only a few stragglers remained. The temple, ancient and shadowed, stood at the edge of the village, its tiled roof curling like a snake's spine. I'd read it was built for Hoang, a shrine to his victory. My curiosity burned. If there was a story here, it wasn't in the dance. It was in the silence that followed. I slipped away from the crowd, my camera slung over my shoulder, and approached the temple. The wooden doors creaked as I pushed them open, revealing a dim interior thick with the scent of incense. Jade statues lined the walls, their carved scales glinting faintly. At the center stood a serpent idol, its eyes closed, mouth frozen in a hiss. I knelt to steady my breath, not out of reverence, but to ground myself. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing back. Then I heard it, a faint rustle, like dry leaves skittering across stone. I froze, my pulse loud in my ears. The sound came again, sharper, from behind the altar. I stood, gripping my camera, and edged closer. The shadows seemed to shift, curling like smoke. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind or a rat. But when I peered behind the altar, the floorboards groaned under a weight that wasn't mine. A shape uncoiled in the dark, a python, massive, its scales catching the flicker of my lantern. Its eyes glowed red, not with light, but with something deeper, something alive. I stumbled back, my camera slipping from my hands. It hit the floor with a crack, the lens shattering, The python didn't lunge. It watched, its head swaying as if measuring me. I ran, my boots pounding against the wood, out into the night. The alleys twisted like a maze, each turn darker than the last. I could hear it behind me, not just the slither, but a low guttural hiss that formed words I couldn't understand. My chest burned, my legs heavy, but I kept running until I reached the square. It was empty now, the lanterns dim. I collapsed against a wall, gasping, and looked back. Nothing, no snake, no sound, just the night, thick and still. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the festival's atmosphere had gotten under my skin. But my camera was gone, left behind in the temple. I couldn't go back, not then. The next morning I returned to Hanoi, my notebook filled with half-formed thoughts and a nagging unease. I tried to write the story, to shape it into something rational, a cultural piece about Lamat's traditions. But the words felt hollow. At night, I dreamed of the python, its red eyes boring into me, its hiss echoing like a warning. I woke drenched in sweat, my hand shaking. I needed answers. I dug through archives, old books, anything that mentioned Lamat. A faded manuscript from a local historian hinted at something the Reuters stories didn't. The serpent Hoang killed wasn't just a beast. It was a guardian, tied to the land, and its death had left a wound. The villagers' festival wasn't just a celebration. It was a plea for forgiveness, a way to keep the curse at bay. I went back to Lamat a week later. The festival was over, the village quiet. I avoided the temple, instead seeking out elders who might know more. An old woman, her hands scarred from years of snake catching, sat outside a small restaurant. She didn't want to talk, but I pressed, offering a few dong for her time. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said, her eyes sharp. I nodded, my throat dry. She leaned closer, her voice low. "It doesn't forget. Wang took its life, and it takes back." She wouldn't say more, only pointed me toward the river where the legend began. The Tien Duc River, now called the Duong, was a sluggish ribbon of water bordered by reeds. I walked its banks at dusk. The same time the princess was said to have been attacked. The air was thick, the water opaque. I felt watched, not by eyes, but by something older, heavier. My foot caught on a root, and I fell, my hands sinking into the mud. When I pulled them free, something glinted in the dirt, a scale, large and iridescent like nothing I'd seen before. I pocketed it, my heart racing. That night, back in my Hanoi apartment, I placed the scale on my desk. It seemed to pulse under the lamplight, its edges sharp enough to cut. The dreams grew worse. The python was closer now, its coils tightening around me, its hiss forming my name. I stopped sleeping, my eyes bloodshot as I pored over my notes. I found a reference to a scholar in Gia Lam who'd studied Lamat's history. His name was Duke, a retired professor with a reputation for chasing myths. I tracked him down to a cramped bookshop, its shelves sagging under dusty tomes. Duke listened to my story, his face unreadable. "You've been marked," he said finally. "The serpent doesn't die. It waits." He handed me a scroll, its edges brittle. It described a pact. Wang's victory came at a price. The serpent's spirit lingered, bound to the land, seeking those who disturbed its rest. I didn't want to believe him, but the scale in my pocket felt heavier, like it was pulling me back to Lamat. I returned one last time, the scroll tucked in my bag. The village felt different now, the air charged with something I couldn't name. I went to the river again, determined to end this. The scale burned against my skin as I stood at the water's edge. I threw it into the Duong, watching it sink. For a moment, the river was still. Then it rippled, a slow, deliberate wave that spread outward. The hiss came again, not from the water, but from inside me, vibrating in my chest. I ran, not looking back, through the alleys and past the temple. Its doors now sealed. I'm back in Hanoi now, but I'm not free. The hiss follows me, faint but constant, in the hum of the city, in the creak of my floorboards. I don't sleep anymore. I can't. My editor thinks I'm chasing a ghost story, but it's no story. It's real, and it's waiting. Last night, I found a scale on my desk identical to the one I threw away. It wasn't there before. I don't know how it got there, but I know what it means. The serpent is patient. It doesn't need to chase me. It knows I'll come back to Lamont, to the river, to the temple. And when I do, it'll be ready.